Good evening, everyone. It appears that all have joined. I understand that Councillor Demota can join us with audio only, but otherwise we have all of council, and it appears all of the necessary staff component with us. So I will begin the evening and welcome everyone to this second of two scheduled municipal budget presentations. We're up against a little competition tonight. I understand that both the Premier and the Leader of the Opposition are holding live Facebook audio presentations this evening, but I'm sure that this is much more riveting than any of that. For those of you joining us this evening for the first time who missed the presentation on Monday evening, I will reiterate that the intent of these presentations is the same as it has been in previous years. That is, this is an opportunity for administration to present to council and to the public a proposed budget. Council, as in any meeting, may ask questions of presenters to better understand and to clarify the proposal. The intent of these sessions is to inform council and the public in preparation for further debate among councillors. The intent is not to enter into debate with administration. These presentations are proposals brought forward by administration for deliberation and ultimately for decision by council. In that regard, council will be informed by these sessions and by further input from the public, which is certainly encouraged. In that respect, the presentation format differs from previous years. Normally, these public presentations occur in person in council chambers. A small number of residents, probably at most about 6 on average, typically attend those presentations. At the conclusion of the presentations, I have in past permitted questions and comments from community members, a very manageable practice in that setting. This year, however, is not normal. There is no opportunity for in-person presentation or for public attendance. We are still learning to manage in a virtual world. We anticipate, and we're certainly hopeful, that there will be broad interest among residents to live stream these presentations. But managing live input from a large audience in a virtual atmosphere is challenging and perhaps beyond my capabilities at this time. We invite anyone watching this evening to please email any questions, comments, or observation to us at info@town.jasper.ab.ca. As with our regular council and committee of the whole meetings, these presentations will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. For those who watch the proceedings in that format, we also encourage you to submit your questions, comments, and observations to that same email address, which will be given again at the close of this evening's proceedings. To allow sufficient time for all who are interested in contributing to the process, we will receive community input until the end of day, Sunday, November 29th. Responses to questions will be provided as early as possible during the ensuing week, and both the questions and the answers will be posted to our website. Administration will compile all questions and answers for inclusion in the agenda package for our meeting on December 8th, and that agenda package will be available on our website on Friday, December 4th. If for any reasons answers are not available, that will be noted. We are confident that the enhanced opportunity for more of our residents to view these presentations either live or by recording, and the extended time for submissions of questions will lead to greater public engagement in the process. We really do look forward to your questions. I know you look forward to the remaining presentations this evening, so I will turn it first to our Director of Finance and Administration, Mrs. Natasha Melanchuk, to take over the presentation with me here.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Good evening, Council, members of the public. I'll just share my here for just one moment. Okay, so for this evening, we will be discussing the budget for community family services as well as operations. Because we went through a summary last evening, I have shortened it for this evening, and we'll touch on a few things that will be repetitive for a few people that attended last night. However, it is shortened, and if anyone wished to hear the full introduction, then you'd be able to go back on the YouTube from Monday evening and view it there. From here, though, Jasper has experienced record number of visitors over the last year since 1930. A heavy demand on municipal services creates enormous challenges for staff to maintain appropriate standards in garbage collection, recycling, water provision, sewer collection, bylaw enforcement, emergency response, and other municipal services. Jasper has a population of less than 5,000 residents and hosts close to 2.5 million each year. 1.5 million this year from January to September, even with 2 months of lost visitation or no record keeping held at the gates. The municipal services and facilities have been intentionally oversized to accommodate visitors, but are primarily paid by property taxes and user fees. Recently, over the years, it's revealed that our oversized facilities are still suffering from the effects of aging and overuse and are in need of major refurbishment or replacement. The proposed 2021 operating and capital budgets reflect these harsh realities. Tonight, we'll be talking about the operating budget as well as the capital budget. When we talk about the operating budget, there's a base, a foundation that maintains council's approved service standard and meets statutory or regulatory requirements. Is referred to the prior year's budget for interim budget approval purposes. Growth is new operating programs, recommended changes to service, changes in overall expenses. Changes to the base budget would be considered a tax requirement and would ultimately affect the tax rate and resulting growth. This evening, we'll be talking about the overall base summary changes. And this is a summary of the changes that we'll be going over by department. We've spoken about a lot of them already in the prior evening. However, there are a few more to talk about in this evening. There's still utilities and insurance, obviously, on the table, and as well as emergency social services with CFS. And also external requests have increased a little bit. We had a request yesterday come to council, so we added that onto the numbers as well, and that's for the seniors bus. Now these numbers here, the base summary changes, are what are prepared and shown in any of the budget documents that you see online at the moment. Any of these growth increases that you will see are not part and parcel, but will still be discussed. They are what is recommended by or asked of council going forward into the new year for service provision. So again, as stated before, these are the estimated 2021 urban residential property taxes, as well as the urban commercial property taxes increases that you would see from either comparing it to from 2019 or 2020 taxes. Now 2019 is what we're looking at going forward and talking about mostly as 2020 was such an odd year. We are trying to get it back to normal as close as possible. So any of the increases projected, as I stated, are off of that base, those base numbers that you've seen in the first chart that I just went over. In our budget, there are two types. There's a tax-based budget and there's a utility-based budget. And especially you'll hear tax-based and utility-based in the operations section. The utilities is the water and sewer, recycling and garbage, and they are cost recovered by the user. The tax base is any of our other services that we provide to the community. It's the expense less the revenues that we would already bring in would require tax coverage for the rest of it to continue. So those are the two that might come up during these conversations this evening. Going in to speak about the capital budget, there is two components to think about when we're talking about the capital budget. There's repair, maintenance, and replace. So this is more on the side of taking care of our capital assets in an operating sense. And then there's growth, and that is where you'll see new capital items coming on. For instance, when the library addition came on. As we pursue budget conversations this evening, we ask to consider the movement of the future asset management. Our infrastructure is aging and requires attention. There is a process of debenture, and if we're lucky going forward in attaining grant support. However, we should also pay attention to saving for the assets we own. Our most recent study on our assets is now 3 years old and draws attention to a replacement cost of assets and is now even larger than it is on the screen at $269 million. This evening, the asset management discussions will mostly be in operations and utilities. And there's a few things to note about these conversations. These discussions on capital are because they are due, because either they've become necessary or they are at the end of their life cycle. And we must notify council. It is our due diligence to inform council of the situation that our assets are in. That being said, some of the conversations to have tonight about capital are fairly lengthy. Also to note, when reviewing any of the capital or even the operating, the 5-year plan is presented. And please always look at the year that we're going into, but also look at the years ahead. We are always focusing on the future. As we look into the next year, there are many projects in recreation and some in operations and utilities that require 2 years to complete. So this is very important to consider going forward. So we may be presenting them as a project in 2021, but we will begin them in 2021 and carry them forward into 2022, given the approval, to complete the project and incur most of the costs then. There is a lot of planning and prep, as well as tender process that must be followed in all of these larger projects. It all takes a lot of time. So it's something to consider at looking at these capital budgets, that we are presenting the figure that is needed to take care of the entire project. However, it might not all occur in 1 year. So that's very important to think about going forward. And I know that our Director of Operations will be touching more on that this evening as he presents some of the capital requests this evening as well. So that being said, like I said, it was a shortened version tonight to highlight the conversations that we're going into with CFS and operations. And now I might open the floor to Kathleen Wexer for Family and Community Services.
Good evening. 26 years ago, the CFS department began creating a comprehensive service hub to address the continuum of required human services, from childcare to one-on-one assistance. These services have provided each and every resident with the opportunity to access the supports they need to thrive. Childcare services, outreach services, community development, settlement services, and local immigration partnership have provided the framework for ensuring that people feel supported, healthy, safe, and connected to community, no matter their age, background, life experience, or economic status. So many things changed in 2020 in the world and at CFS. Before COVID-19 even entered our lexicon, CFS was preparing for the end of a number of our long-standing contracts with the provincial governments, resulting in the loss of parent link programs and significant funding for our outreach program. We are also in the midst of negotiating new contracts with the federal government to ensure continuity of service for the new residents of Jasper, and waiting for news on our family resource network proposal in the hopes of recouping some of the funding that was lost. Just days before our final parent link party, a goodbye to the beloved program for Jasper families, our lives took another turn. A worldwide pandemic was closing our doors. That party never came to be. The final community dinners of the season were canceled. Wildflowers childcare was ordered to close abruptly, and Alberta Children's Services called to announce our successful bid for FRN funding as both a hub for the region and outreach services as a spoke service. Management staff, all the while adjusting to working virtually, took on the task of rolling out the new family resource network contracts and developing systems both locally and regionally to ensure fulfillment of our contractual obligations. I'm enormously proud of our department's resilience and agility this year. Management and staff had the ability and drive to adapt to not only the upheaval of funding changes and cuts, but also to the operational changes imposed by COVID-19 pandemic. The team's strength was particularly impressive, given that all these changes happened simultaneously. Working on the front lines in human services can be exhausting enough at the best of times. This pandemic scenario has escalated that to new heights. I don't take lightly the responsibility of ensuring the physical and mental health, safety, and well-being of the department's staff now and in the coming months and on into 2021. Throughout the pandemic, residents have faced increased negative experiences, as you see on the slide, including job loss, food insecurity, income insecurity, challenges finding a safe place to isolate, roommate conflict, family violence, loneliness and isolation, heightened anxiety, loss of childcare and school for working parents, anxiety for expectant parents, challenges in navigating complex government programs and applications, and accessing the internet or a cell phone for some. On top of all the other challenges in the pandemic context, a cell phone and access to internet has proven to be absolutely critical. Without these tools, people are completely and utterly isolated. They were unable to access services or supports or apply for government supports. Keep up to date on COVID-related news and guidelines, and remain connected to friends and family, or even access entertainment while in isolation. For many Jasperites, the scale was stacked against them this year. And with negative experiences weighing heavily, the work of CFS has been to move the fulcrum, loading the scale with positive supports to tip the balance toward community and individual well-being. The department's work is person-centered. The first priority has always been the well-being of all Jasperites, from infancy to old age. And in the context of the pandemic, we continue to focus on our motto of connecting people to local resources, to each other, and to community life in our mountain town. We've just had to find new ways of achieving these positive supports. At the outset of the pandemic, the department turned food that had already been ordered for the community dinners into takeaway meals, delivered food and meals, supported residents in accessing complex government programs, created a mutual aid Facebook page where community members could connect and support one another, organized a COVID-19 referral line for residents to call with questions, offered a friendly phone call program that connected volunteers with isolated community members, coordinated weekly pandemic community conversations for local agencies and organizations, delivered craft kits for Jasper's children and youth, and combated isolation through virtual programs like the Rec Room Online for Jasper teens, a Mum to Be support group for expectant mothers, and our regular Coffee Connections group that connects vulnerable adults. These positive supports were the immediate response to the pandemic. And since March, CFS has continued to adapt its services and supports to meet the changing needs of our community and its residents. The next slide, please. The ability to be nimble has been CFS's greatest success in 2020. As businesses closed their doors and we all went home to isolate, CFS staff quickly adapted to an increased need from individuals in our community while trialing new ways of offering support. In those early days, the Patricia Street office was transformed with new signage alerting community members that although our doors were locked, community outreach services was still there to help. Without missing a day, community outreach services and settlement services shifted from in-person one-on-one supports to setting up home offices, learning to use Zoom and connecting with clients virtually to ensure that everyone remained well supported and taken care of during this unprecedented change. Recognizing that some of our clients didn't have access to phones or internet, our team came up with creative solutions so the most vulnerable wouldn't fall through the cracks. Childcare staff, although no longer providing childcare, stayed connected to Wildflowers families by sharing videos of themselves on Facebook, reading books, singing songs, and sharing jokes. Some staff also helped out with emergency social services, taking calls on the COVID-19 referral line and organizing food delivery. The emergency social services plan was completed by the community development team with the addition of a section devoted to an emergency concurrent with a pandemic to ensure that Jasper would be prepared in the event of a wildfire or any other emergency during the pandemic. This plan was tested when ESS was deployed in response to the accident on the ice fields. Community development staff quickly morphed the monthly community conversations into weekly opportunities for local agencies, organizations, and individuals to share information on COVID-19's impact on the community and collaboratively develop Made in Jasper solutions. We did this while recognizing that community problems are multifaceted and interconnected, and that no single organization can solve them on their own. These conversations allowed CFS to keep a finger on the pulse of the needs of the community, and armed with knowledge gleaned from our partners and our very own outreach workers, CFS pursued and secured grant funding to ensure the needs of vulnerable residents would continue to be met. Through a variety of COVID-focused funding sources, CFS was able to provide significant support to residents, including trauma counseling, grocery cards, shelter for residents who required a safe place to isolate, cell phones with pay-as-you-go minutes, as well as internet, reduced summer fun and out-of-school care fees for families, as well as food for the program to reduce food sharing and risk of COVID transmission. A program coordinator to develop programs that not only reduce social isolation, but meet the ever-changing COVID regulations and restrictions. Next slide. As we look toward 2021, CFS is committed to remaining nimble and responsive to the community's evolving needs during the pandemic and beyond. The services provided through the CFS department have never been more important or more in demand. And at the same time, these services and programs have become significantly more complex and time-consuming to roll out. You only have to look at childcare for an example of that. At Community and Family Services, our work is tied to connection to each other, connection to social supports, and connection to mountain life. In the past 8 months, connection has looked a little bit different. We haven't gathered for community dinners or connected with outreach workers over a cup of coffee. As physical distancing was implemented, In an effort to protect one another and flatten the curve, CFS found new ways to offer connection. Because at CFS, we understand that when people are connected to one another, connected to local resources, and engaged in community life, they are motivated to give of their time and of their compassion. Next slide. I worked hard to keep the budget amounts in each of the CFS branches at the 2019 levels, and to a large degree, I was successful in doing so. The exceptions are an increase in the requests from Wildflowers Childcare, which are the result of the additional costs of operating in a pandemic. The other exception is emergency social services. However, in 2019, work on ESS was accomplished by drawing on reserves, and in the 2020 budget, $24,600 was allocated to ESS work. So although it appears to be an increase in the 2021 budget, it is in fact the same amount as allocated last year. The ESS plan itself is to a large degree complete. There is a significant amount of work yet to be done to ensure that the plan can be implemented in the event of an emergency. Because unlike other parts of the emergency plan, the ESS component relies entirely on volunteers that need to be recruited and trained. And there's a significant amount of training, even more now because of COVID. There are communications materials and systems to be created and implemented, and there is ongoing updating as ESS at the provincial level evolves. Following a number of large-scale emergencies in the province, including the pandemic and the Fort McMurray fires, ESS plans are evolving at record speed throughout the province. Slide 6, next one. This slide really articulates where the additional requests come. You can see that Natasha and I added in the seniors bus request, as was highlighted at the council meeting yesterday. So that's new as of yesterday afternoon. And I spoke to the other large amounts. Other than that, there's computer cost as recommended from the IT department, and reallocation of maintenance cost, which is recommended by ops. They're not amounts that we have any control over. Slide 7. I was asked if there was anything that it would be, if I was to recommend something, if there was anything else I would add. And this is what I would add. The COVID-19 pandemic has created increased vulnerabilities, and as a result, our outreach team has been overwhelmed with the one-on-one work of addressing individual needs of residents, and thus have been unable to take on the work of program planning as they have in the past. Recognizing that programming across the lifespan is an important component of maintaining a healthy community, I applied to the Canada Emergency Community Support Fund to fund a program coordinator to assist outreach and continuing to provide engaging and safe community programming to combat loneliness and isolation and create healthy social connections. The program coordinator does all the logistical planning, running around and set up for programs, things like picking up grocery cards, to hand out and those types of things, freeing up the time of the outreach workers to attend to the complex needs of the community residents. We were successful in acquiring funding for this position until March 31st, 2021, which is when the emergency community support funding comes to an end. My hope is to secure further funding to extend the position until December 31. However, higher levels of government have not yet announced funding opportunities beyond March 2021. I would like to ask Council to approve funding for the continuation of the program coordinator position in the event that CFS is unable to secure additional funding through other sources. This is a critical contribution to the well-being of residents throughout the pandemic, as is evident in the feedback we received following the pumpkin path last month and our team programming this past summer. With that request, I conclude my presentation and welcome your questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Waxer, and thank you, Mrs. Melanchuk, for your earlier abbreviated introduction. Councillors, questions for Mrs. Waxer? Councillor Keller-Hampy.
Thank you, Mrs. Waxer, for your presentation. The information was very informative. Can you tell me how many children do we have in the daycare currently and in the out of school care?
We have Lisa Daniel in the audience, and maybe we'll let her answer that question. So you would have the up-to-date number.
Hi, sorry. Right now at out of school care, we have 35 children and everyone attends full time. And at the early learning, so at the daycare, we have 37 spaces that are occupied daily, but not all those are full time. Some of them are shared.
Ms. Daniels, are we gone back to full price daycare or are we for parents now? And if we are, how much is it?
Yep, we are at full price. It is $12.85 for 3 and up, and 19 months to 3 years, it's $13.05.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Daniels, and thank you, Mrs. Waxer.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Hampy. Other questions for Mrs. Waxer? Seeing, oh, there I see Councillor Butler, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Waxer, for the presentation, and Ms. Daniels as well for that information. I see that you've requested a increase in the allocation from the tax envelope for daycare for 2021, and I'm looking back over 2020 and the difficulties, of course, that daycare encountered with COVID. Council allocated, I believe the wording was up to $100,000 for the daycare to reopen and for operations in 2020. And given that that was an allocation of, I think, up to $100,000, I'm just wondering about the status of that. Is that all used in 2020? Is there none of that available to flow over to 2021? And I'm not sure who's best positioned to answer that question, so maybe it's Mrs. Melanchuk.
I'm happy to take that one. If Mrs. Melanchuk isn't on here, I can't see if she's
Sure. If you have an answer, absolutely.
We have not used that funding yet. No.
All right. Good for now. Thank you very much for that. I have no other questions. Thank you very much for the information.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Seeing no other hands up, I will pose a question, Mrs. Waxer, and I appreciate that a budget is only a projection and it's based on numerous assumptions. And so I'm interested in the assumptions that you have made underlying this particular budget proposal. In particular, what assumptions have been made regarding the service levels that will be available to residents? What assumptions have been made with respect to the demand for services that you anticipate? Have you made any assumptions regarding restrictions or closures? And finally, what assumptions, if any, have been made regarding the continuation of funding through various grant programs?
Okay. Maybe I'll start from the end. The assumption that I have made is that that contracts that we have signed agreements with will continue because they all extend past 2021. I've assumed, although not entirely confidently, that the FCSS grant will continue. It is well past 50 years of serving Alberta municipalities. And to date, we have not had any indication that is yet, that is up for change, but I certainly have kept my eye on any signs that has potential to end. The rest of the funding pretty much is contractual agreements that have been signed that extend beyond 2021. I suppose that of course there's always a possibility that they could be. There's always an out in every contract that it's possible. I feel that we have been operating in a virtual way since March 17th and have been able to respond to the changing scenario. And I have no concerns about our ability to continue to provide that, except in the child care center where things, again, potentially, but in terms of outreach and community development, they've been able to be adaptable to what the changing circumstances. And we are seeing, as the numbers increase and changes occur in the province, the number of calls are escalating as they did in the spring. And so I have left the outreach at the back to the promise I made 26 years ago, was that we would not ask municipal council for funding for outreach. It's as you know, we did huge shuffles in 2020, and we are down. We were at 6 outreach workers in the beginning of the year. We're now at 5. And I projected 5 into 2021. I'm not sure I remember any of the other questions.
Fair enough. It was a long question. So the other assumptions that may or may not have been made are assumptions with respect to the service levels that will be provided, the anticipated demand, and the effect of either additional restrictions, different restrictions, or closures.
Okay. I think it's very difficult to budget for childcare, predicting a closure or not. So we've predicted we would be open, and yeah. And the others, I think, we've done, as I said in my presentation, a really good job of being able to be adaptable in a whole range of different ways to providing services. And even today, we canceled the forest play, which was the new adaptation for outdoor, opportunities for preschool families to get together due to the change in the regulations. And we switched from in-person, distanced and masked coffee connections for the vulnerable people to online on a dime, basically. So I'm confident in that way.
All right, well, I appreciate all of that. And then just maybe one concluding question. And I appreciate that you can't budget without making assumptions. And so you have to assume that you'll be open. And is your assumption then that if open, demand will continue? Despite COVID and despite the realities and concerns among parents, you are assuming that if the facility can be open, the demand for use will continue.
Yes, and again, I spoke to nimbleness. I think we have the ability also to adapt to enrollment, that it can grow or shrink as required.
Thank you very much for that. I'll return to council. Councillor Journeau, is that your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mrs. Waxer, for your presentation. I noticed that from my calculation of the budget, the amount of increase of tax support for the 2021 over the 2019 year is an increase of 13 or 14.2%, 57,000. So do you mind again repeating to the Jasper taxpayers why the increase to your budget would be higher than what budget increases had been anticipated for the overall municipality, which was around 8% from or less from 2019 to 2021. So I'd like you to again tell the taxpayers at Jasper as to why your budget, your department deserves an increase of 13 or 14%. Thank you.
So I would reiterate that the two major drivers there were the fact that the work on ESS in 2019 was done through drawing on reserves, because we recognize the need for that, and the other piece was the increased cost due to the pandemic restrictions in Wildflowers childcare. Again, we're guessing at where it will be, and as Lisa presented, she has been able to exact savings, even though she had asked for additional money from the municipality. She has been able to offer the service without drawing on that. But it's challenging to know at this point, as everything is changing. But we always would be any childcare service we're offering has got to be safe and following the regulations.
I'm looking again for hands coming up. I see none. So Mrs. Waxer, just before I thank you again and invite you to relinquish the hot seat to the next one. In your presentation this evening, you had a number of slides, and I think there was one, it was slide 6, and it indicated just what you've been discussing with Councillor Journeau, the ESS amount of 24,000, I think an increase for daycare of about 21,000, and I think community development of about 9,000, which totals the 57 or 58,000 increase. And I would only ask that at some point you share that slide deck with us. But that slide in particular is of interest to me.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no other questions from councillors, again, Mrs. Waxer, Ms. Daniels, and Mrs. Melanchuk, thank you all for that portion of the presentation. We are ahead of time, so I am going to invite the next presentation to begin. It is slated, I think, for an hour and a quarter in any event. So Mr. Greathead, you're welcome to begin unless there is an introduction at all from Mrs. Melanchuk. And I would propose that about halfway through or about 7:15 or so, you might well deserve a break after a long presentation. And so I will watch for a convenient time and allow you that opportunity.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. I just want to start off, Gord Hutton, Interim Director of Ops, will be presenting this budget, as well as he'll be assisted with, by Utilities Manager Vidal Michaud and Operations Service Manager Laurent Bolduc. They will all speak to their own areas and departments that they run within Ops. If I can just make an overarching statement, most of the work that we end up doing in Ops is of a reactive nature, and our budget is a little bold. We're looking to switch to a more predictive maintenance and asset management plan than has been previously made thus far. So that's why our numbers seem bold. It's just our requests are just to ensure that we're able to meet the demands in a proper, efficient manner. And at that, I'll turn it over and ask Mr. Hutton to speak.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Mayor and Council and members of the public for the opportunity to present our 2021 operating and capital budgets. Just as a refresher, the Operations Department covers the services of fleet and facilities, roads and grounds, water and wastewater, and garbage and recycling services for the municipality. It's a very diverse department, and because of the diversity, we're going to be sharing presentation duties between the 3 different managers. So with that, I will get underway, starting with my section. And I honestly didn't put myself first. That was someone else's decision, so I'm not grandstanding. So some of the successes for maintenance and facilities and fleet. We hired a full-time mechanic, whose skill set allowed us to increase our in-house commercial vehicle inspection program. We're now doing it all in-house without reliance on contractors, which definitely reduces our cost and makes a more streamlined system. We did some big improvements to sprinklers and fire protection in our facilities, having code assessments done and area improvements made. That was a 2-year project that was completed this year. It will be ongoing, but the hard work is done. We're up to compliance and code now. We had some big capital projects on the go, the Arena Slab and Boards project, which is underway right now. And I don't know if anyone's had a chance to see any pictures or not, but the boards are going in today and it looks fantastic. The majority are done. We also upgraded an area of the activity center roof. That project is nearing completion. We just need some handrails installed and that one will be done. We upgraded the maintenance department computer hardware. We had the unpredicted need to help out with facility mothballing and then facility recommissioning during the COVID shutdowns. That was unexpected, but went quite well. We were able to save some money, reducing heating needs and make the facilities safe again when we went to open up again. We also participated in COVID-related facility upgrades such as sneeze guards, hand sanitization stations and such, just as a general assistance with the other departments. We are in the process of upgrading and assessing our aquatic center and curling rink with some upgrades coming there, those we talked about last night. And we are underway renovating the staff residence of our former CAO to make it ready for our incoming CAO. Some initiatives for next year. I would really like to hire another maintenance worker. I would like to target that as a tradesperson, a plumber or a electrician. We spend a fair bit of money on contracted services in that area, and adding one to our maintenance department would be a huge asset. And that person would not go underutilized either. We have a huge need in that respect. We're initiating a data collection for our asset management. We will be compiling as much data as we can with all our assets, fleet, and facilities. Our mechanic and our maintenance lead hand are very keen to get this going, and I want to enable them as much as possible. Another area where we spend a lot of time contracting is with a boom lift, giving access to rooftops, doing banners, doing Christmas lights, building inspections, repairs, etc. As we go through that, I'll give that a bit of a breakdown. Our new building management system is being installed as we speak. I'm looking forward to getting that system tweaked in the late 2020 and early 2021, and then assessing ways it's going to be able to be expanded and provide us greater efficiency in our facilities. We also are rolling out controlled access system. That installation should be happening shortly here with completion before the end of December. And that's a card system for accessing our operations building. The idea is if the system proves to function the way it should, we would like to expand that over the next couple of years to our other facilities. Operations building, we have some repairs, upgrades planned. And then a couple other programs, a lockout tagout program, which is an improvement on our current practices for shutting down or closing out pieces of equipment in a safe manner. Roof safety program, I'd also like to institute this year. Access to our roofs and working on our roofs is not code compliant right now. We don't have anchor points, we don't have proper handrails, but we are installing the first section as part of the activity center roof upgrade, and I would like to keep that going with a assessment to start. And facility energy monitoring program, a bit more of that later, but there's some issues with our power supply from time to time in Jasper. We have equipment that gets damaged, and there's some potential fixes out there, which we'll hear about a little later. Next slide, please. Okay. So operation budget highlights. Natasha, I can't access the notes on these right now. Is there a way I can see them?
No, I do not believe so unless I share the.
Oh, it's okay. I've got them figured out here.
Okay.
Pardon for the interruption. All right. So budget from 2019 to 2021, we're looking at an increase, and it's related to utility costs, which are beyond our control. We're looking at a $80,000 increase in spending for our contracted summer and winter services. It's really a tough figure to nail down. We never know how much snow we're going to get in the winter, and it always poses a budget struggle to balance that line item. Increase in staffing and an increase for sidewalk repairs and upgrades. And for our public works building, utilities are again uptrending beyond our control. Little increase of $7,000 for janitorial services, and a small increase in salary to keep up with the collective agreement. Okay, our budget level service requests. Housing operations, which also includes a cottage clinic. I'd like to see more of the revenue generated through rent in those facilities going back to our reserves. I think some of the rent we're charging is undervalued, and we should be reinvesting more of that into our reserve funds. We're down 30,000 in staffing for our grounds, up in contracted services, and then up in other. Sorry, I did not get this. I do not know what this acronym means on my notes. I'm sorry. Natasha, can you see that, the 79,000 in MGS? Oh, material costs, material goods and services. Sorry, thank you very much, Natasha. Moving on to properties, the upping in the reserves, 37,000, up in 22,000 in contracted services, and 55,000 in materials, goods, and supplies. Maintenance tradesperson going into salaries. As I mentioned, I would like to see us bring in-house an electrician or a plumber. We both have a need for that based on our contracted dollars we're spending. I'd also like to, with my maintenance staff, give them some incentive financially to increase their in-house training. Power engineering be one. I'd like to see potential for a salary top-up. I'd also like to see a trades apprentice top-up if we were to hire that plumber, electrician. And then we do have other top-up for salaries and benefits in managers. And on roads, we've got $30,000 increase in salaries, $65,000 in contracted service, and $21,000 in materials, goods, and supplies. And public works building, 65,000 more in salaries. And next slide. Okay, I'm going to defer to the next couple slides back to John Greathead. John, you can speak to this. Because of the shuffle within our department, we've sort of all had our hand in this presentation. So I'm going to draw on those that can speak best to the different components.
Yes, our current organizational layout, you can see it on the screen there. There's some modifications that we're looking at making overall. Tash, is the next slide get the new positions in? So what we're looking is, you see under the director position, we have a half-time position shared with parts, geomatics tech. While we still have this person, he's got a wealth of knowledge. He's building all of the GIS work for the parks and for the municipality, and works closely with the utilities department in making our maps and atlases. So when we speak about the asset management programs that we want to get into, we understand that this person is, nearing, he'll be able to retire within a few years. So there's an urgency that we have to, or that I'd like to capitalize on while we still have Mr. Mitchell in the mix. You'll see a red label to the next event, the health and safety advisor. Corporately, we believe that this is a very critical position that we need to have into our roster. The legislative changes that have, continually to be renewed and scrutinized and assessed. We spend an awful lot on our outside contractor that comes in and helps us with the health and safety, but it's just a mountain that we are not getting over regarding health and safety, and so that's a position that we feel is key, as well as an office manager is in our layout there. We need to we're just buried. We're at capacity, and we do need further support within our own office. And again, the positions under that are going to be discussed and to realigned going forward. Is the next slide there, please? Okay. I guess, Gord, I don't have access to the notes on this, so.
Okay, I can walk us through the capital requests coming from my maintenance and facilities department. Starting with the library, there's going to be 4 asks. When the library was originally built, the intent was that we would have a portable generator that can hook up the building. The connection is there, the crossover is there, but the generator was never purchased. And the intent of the generator is to provide a safety backup for mechanical systems in the event of a prolonged power outage. It would fully function as a mechanical system, so we'd keep ambient temperatures and all mechanical systems running, as well as provide some emergency lighting in the facility. This is not a keep the facility open to the public, but to keep the facility from suffering damage if then in the event of a power outage lasting a considerable amount of time. Estimated cost on that would be $40,000. Next slide, please. Also, with the Library and Culture Center, there's quite a few architectural and structural wood details on the building. The picture you can see here are the benches out in front, which are starting to degrade a fair bit just due to their open condition to all the elements. But as a preventative measure, I'd like to refinish all the wood details, structural and architectural, on the building at an estimated cost of $20,000. Delaying would just increase the cost as the deterioration increases. And just the nature of the wood finishes, this is going to be an ongoing item that we'll have to address every couple of years. Next slide. Okay, also at the Library and Culture Center, in the heritage portion of the building, the basement windows have a concrete lintel on top. That concrete is uniformly throughout the whole building, reaching the end of its life cycle. You can see the one picture here. The lintel is quite cracked. The reinforcing steel is exposed. These lintels need to be removed and replaced before we see any extensive damage, water penetration, or potential point failure in the foundation. And the estimated cost of that is $15,000. Next slide. Okay, moving on to our operations and maintenance. Over the past 7 years, we've really increased our workflow in the mechanics realm. Laurent Bolduc did a fantastic job building efficiency. Our new mechanic is taking us to new places with our in-house commercial vehicle inspection program. And the reality is one mechanics bay isn't enough. Repairs don't take one day. Quite often parts are difficult or get delayed, holding up projects. So we end up doing a lot of repair work in our wash bay. And it's not the ideal location, but it does serve the purpose. However, the lighting in the wash bay is substandard for a garage. It's very dim, hard to see. I'd like to increase the lighting in here just to create a safer working environment and further increase our workflow in the mechanics realm, and estimated cost of $25,000. And next slide. Our operations maintenance office and storage is expansion and redesign. The office we have right now is very small. It's difficult to get 3 members in there. If we did hire a 4th member, it would be really tight. And the reality of the maintenance world these days is my staff are spending more and more time doing daily checks on our building management systems, completing tailboard paperwork, completing health and safety paperwork, doing research on parts availability, equipment repairs, etc. So the vision of a maintenance worker being out in the field all the time is less a reality, and they are spending more time in the office. Also, as we build more additional facilities, our spare materials we need to keep on hand grow. The one slide there is a picture, a pallet of stuff that came back from the library at the end of the library construction. We just don't have anywhere to put it. We're at maximum capacity, but we could reorganize and redesign the office and the storage areas to accommodate a lot more material. And that is an ask of $30,000. And next slide. Also going back to our mechanics world, our current used oil and filter storage is not OH&S compliant. It doesn't meet best practices. We would like to install a better storage and handling system. And one of the impetuses is for that outside the health and safety realm is currently restoring the used oil in the white tank you can see there. It is starting to corrode through to a point where regardless of what we do, we need to replace something. And I don't see any reason why we shouldn't do an upgraded system that's OHS compliant, which would move the storage to the outside and leave a drainage system with a pump inside the bays. This is just best practice and recommended for oil storage and drainage. Also in our operations, in the office component, the flooring is a lino laminate flooring tile. It's reaching the end of its life cycle. It's delaminating in certain areas. Wear paths are forming where the office chairs are. It's time to replace that. I'd like to see that done with something a little more industrial, a rolled vinyl product or something with a bit longer longevity. And the central area of our office was never laid out as an office. It fluctuates back and forth in how it's laid out and how it's working. But we would, I think, to maximize this space, engaging a professional to help us design it and set up some additional workspaces for rotating staff, for staff for other facilities, term contractors. There always seems to be a request out there for a spare office or a spare workplace within our organization for someone to fill. And we have the space, we just don't have it optimized to offer that within our organization. And that's a flooring and redesign for $60,000. And moving on. As I mentioned with our operating budget, if we get a fourth maintenance worker, we would need a vehicle for that person to travel around town, haul their materials, tools, etc. Put in a $60,000 ask, and that just goes hand in hand with hiring a new employee. We need to give them the ability to do their job efficiently. Next slide. As I mentioned, another area where we spend a lot of contractor dollars, not just in maintenance, but in all our departments, is on a boom lift. We use it to do our Christmas decorations. We use it to do our street banners. We contract them to do repairs in our facilities, to do basic inspections, cleaning gutters, accessing roof, HVAC material. Based on our current rental rates, I see a payback period of 3 to 5 years. However, I also see having a boom lift available all the time rather than trying to schedule and book around weather and contractors' schedules. It would be deployed a lot more than we currently do. So I think the payback period would be closer to 3 than the 5 years. Thank you, Tash. Next slide. As I mentioned, we have some power distribution issues in Jasper from time to time. The most recent event resulted in about $15,000 in damage and related costs to our equipment. We lost a couple of VFD motor controls, a couple pumps, and by the time you add up the cost to replace that equipment, diagnose it, source parts, etc., we calculate that at about $15,000. investing in a power monitoring hardware, which could track a number of things more than just the power, but it would track and document the power coming into a facility. It would allow us to help understand what happened, why it happened, and potentially give us some evidence to, or a reason to start a discussion with our power supplier to see if they can help us out with any repairs based on the ability to capture an event in a readable format. This equipment also has the added benefits of tracking power usage within a facility. So we could track cycles, seasonal cycles up and down, event tracking, just give us a bit more comparative data. And you being able to track power usage would also help us secure green funding initiatives. There seem to be a lot of facility grants out there these days are tied to green initiatives. And if we could actually provide a real-time current power monitoring, it would be an asset for grant applications. And this type of equipment would also allow us to track daily changes to power consumption for equipment. And that is a very useful tool in identifying changes to the equipment and diagnosing potential failure of the equipment or components. And that's at a estimated cost of $30,000, starting with our piece of equipment that often are damaged most frequently. Okay, so as I mentioned, none of our roof access points or areas we work on the roofs are code compliant right now. What I would like to do is do a restraint protection assessment at $20,000 that would identify where we're deficient and how we could become code compliant. And then pending that result, start a program of roof access improvements at $50,000. The $20,000 would be a first year one-time cost. The $50,000 would be a rolling cost going through 3 or 4 years. But if we had the funding available, we could combine that with any roof upgrades we're doing at the time, rather than adding something to a roof after the fact, which is never the ideal situation. And just for reference, the Canadian Occupational Health and Safety magazine just had an article out where a roofing company was fined just over $100,000, not for a lost time or injured worker. It was just simply because they weren't providing their workers with the same or the required roof anchor points that they should have been. And that's the position we're also placing our employees in from time to time. So I would like to use this program to reduce our liability and potential for fines, et cetera, from occupational health and safety. The next slide, please. Another area where we're deficient as far as code and OH&S is our lockout tagout. That's a procedure where a piece of equipment is shut down to work on it, either for in a temporary means or long-term means. The hardware for doing that correctly is not cheap. We have a lot of facilities and a lot of different pieces of equipment. And unfortunately, there's no universal piece out there that would work with all equipment. So we'd have to be tailor purchasing lockout, tagout devices and equipment for each electrical panel, for each piece of equipment. And that's an ongoing cost of $20,000. And coincidentally, the same Occupational Health and Magazine just had another example from the oil field where, again, not a lost time or injured worker scenario, just failing to follow OH&S standards. An energy company was also fined over $100,000 for non-compliance. So again, this program would remove some of our liability in that and allow us to improve our standards. That takes me through the facilities and maintenance component.
Your Worship, thinking maybe now might be a good time to either break, or if there are questions, as you had stated before, it's we'll have to break this part up a little bit in order to for it to flow without any break?
Thank you for that. We did advertise to the public that we would be taking a break, and we should be true to our word. I take it that there is going to be now a change in speakers and a change in focus. We can always come back to everybody for questions. So if it is a convenient time, it will be the only break of the evening. It is fairly close to what had been advertised and scheduled. So I'd suggest if it works for staff, we take our break now and then recommence at 7:30 with the next speaker, and then questions to Mr. Hutton and others who have presented already when we get to the conclusion of the presentation. All good. All right. I will call a recess now. I have 7:18, so we have 12 minutes and we'll reconvene at 7:30. Welcome back. I have 7:30, Mr. Greathead and your contingent. If you have all reassembled, we can begin. I understand that Mrs. Melanchuk is back. So I know we had just finished hearing from, well, I think we had finished hearing from Mr. Hutton, at least for this segment. So I will turn it over to you, Mr. Greathead, and either you or some other member of your staff, go ahead.
At this point, it looks like this group of slides will be directed to the Operations Service Manager, Mr. Laurent Boulduc. Laurent, if you are ready and can take us through this.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so it's my first presentation, so bear with me. I hope I will sound good to you. Anyways, I guess we're starting with this slide where we're bragging about our successes. So one of the big project that we had this year was to remove a lot of the pine beetle kills that occurred on our property. We targeted mainly the areas that were highly visited or utilized, like picnic areas and parks and things that are near infrastructure and people, essentially. So that was really nice. It alleviated a lot of potential danger in the future, and by doing a lot of it at the same time, we're saving a lot of money, economy of scales. We're hoping to be able to finish off this project this year, as you will see further in the presentation. We did ramp up asphalt this year as well. We spent a bit more money than usual. And we had some decent results. We did some pretty good patches, and we have, again, some more plans for next year. We revamped some components of our OHS, so just becoming more compliant, and we've establish a competency program in our staffing, so just to make sure that everybody are well trained into their duties. And I mean, a lot of the people already were, but that allows us to comply to OHS, which is a very important thing, as Gord mentioned earlier. There's some big fines that are attached to negligence or mistakes that we could be making, so we have to cover our bases. So that's one step in the right direction. We've hired quite a few new staff this year, and so that's coming into play already. So we're pretty happy to be able to do this. Another of our highlights here is the entrance signs. Made a little bit of controversy. Personally, I find that they're beautiful, and it's a nice touch. We're pretty happy to have the original masons that did the first signs taking part in this. Probably one of the last jobs that that are going to be made by with Mr. Shapansky and his mentor. So yeah, we can move on to the next slide. Some of the upcoming initiatives that we're going to be working on in the future here in the next year. So we're planning on ramping up a lot of things that we have are at the point where they need to be revamped. So our irrigation system, we're hoping to do some upgrades to help with certain valves and stuff needs to be replaced. That'll help us to make sure that they stay dry over the winter and they don't burst and cost us a lot of money in the summer when we're reopening the irrigation. We're hoping to ramp up our road repairs as well, trying to get to a speed where we can revamp the town before it gets too bad. We are planning on hopefully trying to finish off what we started with the pine beetle kills, and we also are planning on hiring a sport field technician so that we can better service our sports fields and make sure that we don't have to resod anytime soon. We've learned over the years that it's an important thing to stay on top of. It could be quite expensive to resod those sports fields and stuff. So bringing the know-how in-house is going to be a great asset and save us money down the road. We are also hoping to be able to do the streetscape study to help us guide us in the future to revamp essentially the downtown core and some of our streets. We have a lot of wood structures that are eroding in town as well that we're hoping to try to get at this year, and the utilities as well as operations are hoping to create an asset management system that is going to help us to become more efficient in the future. We can move to the next slide. So our one of our asks for this year is the review of the operation service. So essentially, we would like to get a roadmap and to be more organized, and we have to sometime take a pause or spend a little bit of money and develop a plan that'll give us more efficiency in the future. So this is essentially the request for this review. So things have changed with health and safety and legislations that we need to make sure that we comply to, and we need to rely on experts. We're talking about potential lawsuits and stuff, so we need to rely on experts to make sure that we don't miss anything. And that is not cheap, but it's essential. And certain things with winter maintenance, we need to rework our systems. Like we're finding some inefficiencies, so we would like to come up with a plan again so that we can be as efficient as possible. And some other areas where we need some guidance, or we need to regroup and come up with a plan is with our recycling system. A good example is our compost, where the end product is not what we want. We're spending close to $100,000 on compost, and so we need to see where we're going wrong, and revamp the system so that it's more efficient, and then we end up with a product that we can be proud of. And the world of solid waste and recycling is changing as well. I think it's no secret that Parks Canada is looking at unloading the transfer station, and the world of recycling is changing as well. So so we need to sit down and make a plan, and this is what this is all about. The streetscape plan, I guess it's a bit the same story. We have a lot of things that we need to revamp. A good example would be our bike racks, and some of them are overfilled, some of them are very old. So it's time to come up with a concept. Some of our street planters and certain things in the downtown areas are eroding, and so it's time for a revamp of a lot of things. So it would be nice to have a plan that incorporate all the components, so that we have a nice cohesive look throughout the town. I mean, we do have 2.5 million people visiting the town, so it's nice to have a nice curb appeal. And yeah, so that this will again give us a nice plan to look at in order to be more efficient in revamping downtown.
But it's favorite hoodie day tomorrow.
Oh, it's favorite hoodie day?
So
I was gonna wear my other blue.
somebody's got his.
I didn't know it was favorite.
Elisa, I think you're.
That. The blue one that's downstairs?
It's fine. I can wear that.
No, honey, it's okay.
I don't know what to wear.
Somebody send a quick email to text Elisa. Oh, okay, there we go.
Sorry, I had to stop screen sharing in order to mute. Natasha, if you would like to start it again.
Asphalt is so this year we're asking for $400,000. May looks like a lot, but to give you an idea of scale, we have about, if we were to redo the whole town, we probably have $25 million worth of asphalt. So even at a rate of $400,000 a year, we're looking at 60 years to resurface. So may look like a lot, but in the world of asphalt, you don't go very far with $400,000. Essentially, what we would be doing with this is one block on Geeky between Larch and Pine. So I think most people is familiar with that block. It's a fairly long block, but that gives you a good idea. So that'd be resurfacing from curb to curb for one block, $200,000. So it gives you a good idea of how much it cost. And so yes, it's quite a bit more than what we're used to spend, but at some point we need to start ramping this up. Like if we, because 60, if we look at 60 years at the rate of $400,000 a year, some of the streets are gonna be pretty eroded by then. So with the other $200,000, we would do a little bit what we did this year. Some of the main damaged area would get repaired, and we would spend a fair amount of that into crack sealing, which we haven't done in a couple of years. So we need to catch up with our crack sealing. That saves us money down the road. It definitely is a good way of preventing water from getting underneath the asphalt and causing damage. Well, this one, everyone by now have seen the new stage. Very generous donation from our sponsors. So we're at this point, we're looking at just doing the electrical and some of the cosmetics, like having some walls to protect the artists with not so clement weather sometimes, or just essentially making it more comfortable for the performers. So yeah. We're looking at spending a fair amount of money also with our lawn equipment. A lot of the stuff that we have is pretty old. So for example, the aerator that we have is probably 20 years old, and it's about a third of the size as the one as you see in the slide. So by purchasing this one would be a lot more efficient and be able to aerate deeper and help with the compaction and some of the fill, that one of the problems that we were having in the past. Here's another piece of equipment that, again, just increasing productivity, increasing efficiency. Seeding is very expensive, so that allows for the seed to take better and be a little harder for the birds to steal it. So just an example of how we can become more efficient. Yeah, we have, like I said earlier, we have a lot of wood structure that is degrading. So although I like the old wood look, there comes a point where it falls apart and it becomes an issue. Here's $50,000 for rehabbing the old AMA building. I mean, that one speaks for itself. It's one of the big eyesore in town, I find, an abandoned building. So yeah, that one speaks for itself. Our memorial bench program has fallen behind a little bit. We have overestimated the longevity of these benches. They look beautiful, and I really like sitting on them. They're a very good idea, but unfortunately they decay very quickly, and that was not really anticipated. So we're trying to catch up with the program, and yeah, this is going to require some attention, because we have, if my memory is good, we have almost 100 benches out there. So yeah, it's something that we need to talk at some point down the road. But at this point, we're trying to do our best to limit the damage by refurbishing them. Our irrigation system, as you can see on this picture, is very old. And like I said earlier, some of the valves are leaking, and some of them had like very old features, like the lids, and even just the it's old culvert cut and dug into the ground. So we need to modernize some of these, and yeah, $20,000 would allow us to get started on some of this project. That's a good example of some of the older vehicles we have here. So that is our 1-ton truck. It's used in the winter as a spare sander, and in the summer, yeah, we use it for all kinds of stuff. But it's a '94, and it's not in very good shape. It's time for a new one. And that's one vehicle that we another pickup truck that we're looking at replacing. Yeah, yeah, it's just a matter of maintaining our fleet here. So a couple of other things that we were asking for, a little bit of an upgrade on some of our small engine and hand tools that we're using. So it goes anywhere from shovels to lawnmowers, weed eaters, chainsaws. We have quite a bit of equipment, so yeah, it's just a matter of keeping up, making sure that the guys can do their jobs. We're also looking for a screener, and that'll work with our sports fields. We can purchase cheaper material, topsoils and stuff, if we and then we can screen it in-house, so that saves us money. There's a few other usage that we can use it for. We can screen our winter mix in the winter, so and we can also use it for the compost. You know, bringing a screener from out of town is quite expensive, so there's quite a few usage for the screener. We also looking at spending another $40,000 to finish off what we started, like I said earlier, with the pine beetle kill. There's still a few areas that remain that we didn't have a chance to address this year. So some of the less visited areas, but that still can be an issue, like on the edges of town, where mainly where some of the residential area is. So we don't want any of these trees to fall on people's houses or fences or even people. And $25,000 goes with the replacement of some of the wood structures that we have in town that are falling apart. You may be familiar with some of the planters behind the Athabasca hotels, if you want a good example. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Laurent. I guess this section now we'll go over to Vidal, please.
Actually, Mr. Greathead, I think I'll do the summary on the figures first and then lead into presentation from Vidal Michaud.
That sounds great.
Okay, so this is the utility budget highlights. This is looking at the proposed 2021 versus 2020. The budget didn't change in 2020 for the utilities, so we have kept it compared to the 2020 year. So in water, you're seeing an increase of just over 300,000. This is for terms in summer, for a compliance officer, and for salary trending, keeping up with the staffing. This works out to be $125,000 overall. They have offset this with a decrease in contracted services by $29,000. So that's good. They're looking to increase staff and try to decrease the contracted service needs. There is, however, an increase in materials, goods, and supplies of $33,000, and the increase to reserves here would be $192,500. Now, this all being said, as I indicated before, the amounts can be indicated from council on how they would like it to be applied to the budget as well. Now, in sanitation, they are looking for 75,000 additional in staff. There are some ups and downs in contracted services, however, still an increase in $16,000, an increase in $25,000 in materials, goods, and supplies, and $300,000 towards the reserve contribution. This one we see a lot of change in as well because of debt going on in this department. There's an increase of $215,000 for debt payments on principal and interest. And also there was $132,000 transfer that occurred like recreation had occur, where we thought that the debenture was going to be taken out in 2019. However, the first payment came out in 2020. So that changes that number substantially as well. In garbage, there's a decrease of $50,000 in staff trending. $12,000 increase in contracted services, and we had an increase in disposal costs of $14,000 in this area as well. And we'd be looking at $67,000 increase in reserve transfers. And recycling, it's staff of an increase of $60,000 and $7,000 in overall trending from 2019. Now, that being said, this is the numbers that are put into the budget as it stands and as you see it in the documents online. However, there are additional needs, and operations sees the need for more than this, however, has put these numbers forward, and this is where the additional increases to reserves would be. So close to $1 million in water, 2.3 or close to 2.4 in sanitation, and another 25,000 in recycling, equaling about a 3.4 increase into reserves. And this, as we discussed before, would align more so to our asset management plan going ahead. And keep in mind that we are 3 years behind when the study was done. So we would still be catching up, even with these numbers. Here is the projected estimated garbage and recycling per 2-month billing cycle increases. So you would see a total of $7.37 in a residential single dwelling home, and commercial would see just over $15 every 2 months increase. And that's just based off of the first slide of numbers that I spoke to. And all of that being said, and we do not have the water and sewer projections on the table as of yet, because the conversation is still being had with council on utility rates for water and sewer going forward into the new year. So those projections were not included in the slides at this time. And that being said, there is the summary for utilities, and I will pass the floor on to Mr. Vidal-Michaud.
Thank you, Mrs. Malinchuk. Good evening, Mayor and Council and members of the public. Bear with me, like my counterpart, Laurent, this is my first presentation, so excuse my lapses in vocabulary and professionalism, but I'll do my best, I promise. So year in success for the Water and Sewage Department. We saw the addition of 3 new staff, including me, a utility manager, and we were able to hire 2 new certified water treatment operators. And so that was a good accomplishment. To find those and to retain them in Jasper is quite an issue sometimes. Also on the infrastructure side, we found, located, and repaired a large water leak that was actually accounted for about 25% of our daily production. So that was 1.2 million liters of water that was just going into the ground every single day. So to put that into perspective, that's the same amount of water that's in our municipal swimming pool that was just disappearing into the ground. So that was a great find for the team. Last year, we purchased a new combination sewer cleaner unit that uses recycled water. That's new to Alberta. We are one of the first ones in Alberta to use that kind of technology. But that being said, we increased our efficiency by over 40%, and also we were able to save over 800,000 liters of water by just reusing the wastewater itself. New stuff in the sewer department was we have a new contract operator at a wastewater treatment plant, naming EPCOR. They have started January 27th of 2020, and they're going to be with us until we attribute a new long-term contract for the operations. Besides that, our wastewater treatment plant saw some major investment over the past year and into next year. As part of the new operator, they did a full service review and found some very critical parts in dire need of replacement. Also, our infrastructure investment with the valve replacing, hydrant replacement. This year, we started a model of a shared public-private enterprise, with purchasing and labor. What was basically, we're able to streamline our operations, save a lot of costs on some details, and we're able to replace a lot more infrastructure with a smaller budget. And also we've been looking into new water meters in locations that there weren't before to increase revenue. Namely, we have a water line going down the 93A towards some of the outfits down there that we're able to finally capture and actually charge for. And we're going into 2021, we are gonna look into this more and more and try to capture these small but important sources of revenue. So next slide. So the upcoming initiatives is a commercial water meter inspection. Currently, we do not have a very good grasp on exactly what's in our system, sizes of meters, inventory numbers. So we're going to go out and have a good send an operator to do a proper inventory and file them all. Sanitary mainline repairs. We're going to start. We'd like, with the capital purchase coming forward, be able to start assessing and actually cammering and going into sanitary mainlines and seeing the state. We had a study in 2016 that did 20% of our network. Well, there's still at 80% of our network that we have absolutely no idea what condition it's in. So we're going to invest time and some money into getting a better understanding of what's out there. For the wastewater treatment plant operating contract, we have our request for proposal and development that should be out early December and closed by hopefully April for a long-term contract for the operation of our wastewater treatment plant. So that's in the making. Once again, our wastewater treatment plant, we got major upgrades and major repairs coming up. So some pretty critical infrastructure that needs to be looked after. An initiative of we're going to start transitioning to a software-based workflow. Currently, we're mostly paper-based and memory-based, to tell you the truth, and we want to embrace the 21st century and purchase the right software to streamline our operation and just be better at our jobs and more efficient at our jobs. We want to increase our water valve replacement programs by, once again, combining private and public enterprise to streamline the process and also make it more cost-effective for the taxpayer. And a big one for us too is going to be a water and sewer system capacity review through hydraulic modeling. And we're going to talk about that just a bit further. So next one. So valve replacement program, we're asking for $150,000 this year versus the $50,000 previously. With $50,000, we're just noticing that we just cannot keep up with the failing valves. And our water system is in currently pretty good condition, considering its age. But one thing that is determined to fail quite often is the valve. We have over 270 valves in our system, and with a life expectancy of 20 to 30 years, so we have to start replacing more and more. The vast majority of our valves are installed in 1960s and 70s, so we're at that 60 to 50-year-old mark. So yeah, so we'd just like to increase it to better reflect the need today. Next slide, please. Hydrant rebuild program, we're still asking for the same amount as last year. Through a bit more streamlined system, we're able to address, it says 15 hydrants here, but last year we actually replaced 2 hydrants fully, like the one in the picture, but we were able to rebuild and recondition to new another 24 hydrants. So with bulk purchasing and a bit of creativity, we're able to do a lot more than anticipated. So that being said, over the next, with 125 hydrants in our system, we are hoping that in the next 4 years, everything's going to be put back to new, and then we can just get rid of that and just become a normal servicing program instead of a replacement. Next slide. Our water well servicing. So this is one of our beautiful water well heads. Our water wells were drilled and installed in 2005. They've never been looked at except for one that we had an issue in 2018. But we do not know the condition. Over time, these types of wells, they plug up, they get sanded, they get silted, and you have to clean them like any other filter. So we're asking for $90,000 to pull all every single pump out, clean them, inspect them, and then clean out the well and re-put them. So hopefully it can give us another 10 to 15 life expectancy on these pumps and wells. Next slide. SCADA maintenance. SCADA is our computer oversight of our system, what is a critical piece of our infrastructure. Same thing, it was, this system was in place since 2005. With any piece of hardware that's 15 years old, it's well past its life expectancy, with some pieces of our hardware not even supported by the manufacturer anymore since 2012. So this is determined as a critical replacement because we're one power bump away from catastrophic failure. So yeah, that's that. Next slide. Hydraulic modeling. Right now we are based on, we do not have any idea of the capacity of either our water distribution or our sanitation collection. We are just adding on infill without really knowing if it can take it or not, and just assuming that it's always been okay, so why not one more? So a hydraulic model would be a computerized system that was designed by engineers to actually lay us a roadmap ahead of what the allowances are, what the tolerances are in our system and capacities, so we have a better education of where to spend the money appropriately to get a longer longevity of our system. Next slide. Commercial water meter replacement. This picture is a typical commercial water meter that's approximately 25 years old. Typical meters of this type have a life expectancy of 10 to 15 years accuracy. Out of the few water meters we sent back for testing, they usually register under by 10 to 15%. So with $250,000, we can replace every commercial meter in town, and they provide about 70% of our revenue. So we're thinking, with that being said, with a 10% increase in revenue, we'd be able to do the buyback of this within 3 to 4 years, and after that would be just more revenue for us. Next slide. Abandonment of trailer park manholes. 2004, 2005, 2006, the trailer court was redesigned, redone, and all new infrastructure put in, but the old infrastructure was never abandoned correctly. There's over a dozen manholes that were not abandoned, and those are located in people's yards. And over the years, people have complained about them. And so with this money, we go in and abandon every single manhole properly, but the sanitary lines that are under the trailers would have to remain and be treated on an as needed basis as houses get replaced, basically. Next. Sanitary RV disposal at the S block. This came with the S block parking lot proposal. So with the abandonment and the deregulation of our current RV sandy dump, with not having wash down water in winter, that could lead to unsanitary conditions and not having potable water and people using the infrastructure as potable water, we are looking at contamination issues. So this was a budget proposed by WSP, who designed the S block parking. If we wanted to incorporate the sanitary RV disposal, and it's partially designed already, is my understanding, and that was the associated cost for final design and installation. Back to the wastewater treatment plant. This is one of our pieces of fleet that's technically an antique. It's not in use anymore. It failed its annual inspection because of rust and a frame, so it's not even repairable anymore. So this is part of a biosolids handling. Biosolids handling is one of the key parts of our wastewater treatment. It's a final step of the wastewater treatment. And we use this vehicle. We have a spare right now that's hauling every day, but that one too is getting past its life expectancy. So we're gonna need a replacement soon. Water service, we have a old crane truck that was a legacy from Parks Canada. Once again, it's an antique. We are looking into more of a streamlined work truck that's a bit more useful for what the utility department typically seek. And this would also help with this private-public enterprise that we're doing for more and more of our infrastructure replacements. We're running into crane rentals that are quite cost prohibitive. So a vehicle like this, we would be able to use for multiple things, and including infrastructure replacement. Next slide. Sanitary collection system, mainline camera would be a rover camera for those sanitary inspections. It's basically a robot you send in a sanitary line to video and inspect and log the structural condition of your sanitary main lines. And the rapid assessment system is another software tool. What would let us be able to quickly assess the entire system through spot checks and determine the level of blockage of a line, either it's from root or grease. These kind of tools would just streamline our system, and hopefully we'd be able to be more proactive on blockages and backups and not reactive like we have been so far. Next. Wastewater treatment annual capital requirements. So $2.8 million is quite a high demand, but so the raw sewage lift station rehabilitation, that's the phase one. There's actually a larger project slated for 2022. So that would be the planning, the inspection of it. Mixer replacement and process air blower replacement are part of our treatment process. Mixer replacement, that's a critical piece for mixing the sludge in the treatment process. Our process blower air replacement is the heart and soul of the bioreactor. So the main way that we treat our wastewater. And also the dewatering, upgrade, and centrifuge replacement. There's no redundancy in the system. That's why, and we have EPCOR right now that brought up their specialists, and we cannot repair the one that we have in place. It has to be replaced, sadly. Next slide. So I think I'm done, and this would be go back to our solid waste manager, Laurent Bolduc.
Okay, so bragging time again. So yeah, we this year we tapped into a pretty good deal with our garbage bin replacement. I guess one advantage with COVID-19, we were able to come up with a very good deal with Hall with a refurbishing program. So we were able to replace 16 bins for what we usually spend on about 8 bins. The product is almost as good as new. I find they have a really good paint booth over there, and due to the downturn, they had a lot of staff that needed work, so we were able to get a really good deal on refurbishing. So that's something good that came our way. Again, the competency program that we're putting in place, it's complying to OHS. We did start a cardboard awareness program with the pickups. It's a good start. It still needs a lot of work. We still need to talk about it. We still need to find the long-term solutions, but we did increase efficiency. I wouldn't say substantially, but enough that it makes a difference. And the other thing that we started this year in collaboration with Alberta is a small appliance recycling project, a pilot project that we have at the transfer station. So now we can recycle small appliances. So it's very interesting. It's really only started about a month and a half ago, but so we don't have much feedback on the results and stuff, but we will keep you updated on that. The upcoming initiatives for the coming year. While we would like to keep going with this garbage bin deal with Hall, they're still in the same boat. So we're hoping that we can tap into that again this year and take advantage of this opportunity. The touchless system. So we're also hoping to utilize an opportunity with the province with the must grant and replace our street cans with touchless system. In the past, it was never really a big issue, although it always was an issue. People don't want to stick their hand in that latch. I'm talking about mostly the tourism side of things. People are not comfortable with it. So and now with COVID-19 and probably people are going to be really shy. And this summer became quite apparent. We had quite a bit of garbage left around. We were being called in for overflowing garbages because there was garbage around it. So it's becoming apparent that the old latch for tourism side of things is a problem now. And the asset management system will be part. Hopefully, if we can get there, will help us with our maintenance and become more efficient, fixing bins, offering a better service to our customers, having less leaking bins, better for the environment. So there's quite a few advantages to that one. The solid waste route system also. So there's some of the programs that we're hoping to get on board with this, and you'll see them on the next slides. So yeah, like I was saying, usually we go with $60,000 for bin replacement, but this year we're hoping that we can do more with the refurbishing. So we have quite a few bins, and some of them are still, they're up like 40 years old bins. So we need to catch up. So that's a good way of saving a few dollars, getting more bins. Refit the old garbage cans. So now $120,000. There's probably going to be some changes in with the service. We might need some more cardboard bins if we find some solution downtown for cardboard pickup and stuff. So we do have a little bit of room there, and if we don't use it all on refurbishing bins, we do have a little bit of a buffer if we come up with some solutions with the with other areas of service. The electronic route management system is something that we're asking $30,000 for. So it's all about efficiency, or mainly about efficiency, I should say. These routes, they allow us, these route system allows us to collect a whole bunch of data, and then we can use these data to help us become more efficient. I'll give you an example. It'll adapt to the seasons, and so when you pick up a bin, you can tell the system that it was 30, 40, 50%, 60% full, and then the computer collect all the data and space the pickups according to the percentages of how full the garbage was. So it automatically takes it all into consideration and spits out the most efficient route. So some municipalities are saying that they increase their productivity by 20%. I don't think that in a small town like ours we would be getting these numbers, but 1% efficiency in staffing and gas and wear and tear on vehicles equals about 1 to 2%, let's say. So even if about 1% would equal about $8,000 to $10,000. So even if we went 1% more efficient, we would pay this off in 3 years. So it's definitely a good investment. So this is our pride of the fleet. Like, she's done a very good job for us. I'm an old school guy. I love that truck. It still runs, but I don't know for how long. So, it's definitely served us well. And $250,000, very expensive price. The high costs is related to the bear proof system. Yeah, these trucks are not cheap, but yeah, the haul all system is a great system, but it's not cheap. We're asking for a forklift replacement. In the cart, it's essentially using a cardboard recycling system, so our processing. We use it every day. If we don't have it, we have serious issues. The one that we have now in the cardboard room is getting a bit older. The one you see on the slide, that's the old forklift, and it's still being used for various usage, but it's our backup, but we can't really use it anymore because there's certain repairs, safety related. Example, the rams are pitted. That's $2,000. The chains needs to be replaced, another $1,000. This unit is getting old enough. It's not really worth fixing. So we're essentially losing our backup unit. We need to have a backup, otherwise the cardboard recycling just it ends up not being. We cannot not have a forklift for more than a few days, so we need a backup. The touchless garbage can system. So we've spoke about it a little bit earlier. So yeah, so we're hoping to be able to utilize some of the MUST grant for it, and therefore not bear the whole cost of doing this. COVID-19 is the main driver for this initiative. And this number is a little bit high. I'm negotiating right now to try to see how much we can get for the used containers. Like some of the used containers are not worth much, hardly anything. Some of them are worth more, so we're trying to deal with Halal so that they buy them all back from us at a decent price. That remains to be it still remain in negotiation at this time, so this number might go down a little bit is what I'm saying.
And that sums up the operations presentation of the budget for 2021. I'm available for any questions you may have.
All right, well, thank you very much, Mr. Greathead, Mr. Bolduc, Mr. Hutton, Mr. Richaud, and Mrs. Malinchuk. I appreciate that the presentation this year was made more difficult because you, Mr. Greathead, have taken on the added responsibility of being our interim CAO, for which we thank you. But this was a great demonstration of teamwork. So all 5 of you contributing to the presentation, it's very much appreciated. I will open the floor to questions we'll direct them through Mr. Greathead, and he can then deflect them as he considers necessary. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland, and thank you, Mr. Greathead and Ms. Malinchuk and your teams for the presentation this evening. And it was really informative. Quite a lot of information to digest in a short period of time. So I definitely look forward to going through these items individually over some time. And I would just like to say to Mr. Bolduc and Mr. Michaud, what a great job you did presenting to council for your first time. So thank you very much, much gratitude. And I'm certainly happy to see you both moving up in the organization and presenting to council.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath, Councillor Journeau, and then Councillor Callagher-Empey.
Well, Councillor McGrath just took the winds out of my presentation that I did want to congratulate Mr. Bolduc and Mr. Michaud for their fine presentations. Considering they admitted to be rookies, they did very well. But I'm going to go a little further and have questions. First of all, Mr. Bolduc, Lara, you mentioned there's new signs around at the entrance of town. I understand the work is probably not finished, but I'm wondering if we could, you mentioned them, so it's not a budget item, but it's an item that has to be discussed. I'm wondering if we could do something about removing the fence in front of it, or at least make it more presentable. This question has been asked more than once. So that's my first question is to Mr. Bolduc, please.
Yes, we know it's the thing is that we have to dig in the back of it. There's the solar power that is going to be attached to it. It still remains to be done. There has been some technical difficulties with the project, with finishing the project. That's why it's still on. You know, perhaps what we might be able to do is shrink the parameter of it to maybe make it more appealing. We'll look into that tomorrow and see if we can just reroute, because we may not need the entire parameter to be fenced anymore. It's going to be around the back, so I will look into that for you and see what we can do about that tomorrow.
Thank you for that. May I have another question, please, Mr. Ireland, or Mayor Ireland?
Yes, go ahead.
My question is, I'm going to go back to Mr. Hutton. In his opening remarks, he talked about the arena and the progress there. These are past items that we've authorized, but there was no mention of the curling rink, and I'm wondering what the progress on the curling rink is, please.
Yes, sorry. In my mind, I tend to lump the 2 projects together, the curling rink and the arena. The curling rink is getting very near completion. The as we know, the concrete pad is done. The perimeter walkways have been installed. This week they're working on the carpeting on those perimeter walkways. They will be reinstalling the lockers that were removed for construction. My maintenance crew is doing a final clean on the roof trusses, and we should expect that area, that component of the project to be done at the end of this week or early next week, and ready for plant startup and slab cool down.
Thank you for that. I have one last question. Again, it's to Mr. Hutton, and it's a general question. We hear a lot of mention about lack of code compliance. It's not to code. We need to replace this because of code. We hear that a lot. We don't only hear it in budget. We hear it year after year in budget. We also hear it during the season. Like, I don't hear that from the private sector. Why is there such a difference in the commentaries around code compliance with the municipality that we do not hear in the private sector? Thank you.
I don't know if I can answer that question other than to say that when we are unsure about the condition of an equipment, a best practice, a facility, we bring in an inspector, so a professional to give an assessment to provide us with the information we don't have. And that's why it comes up in our projects repeatedly, is we realize that, you know, there are deficiencies out there. I'm working really hard. So 6 years that I've been here, there's always another one to be discovered, and I sense there's some frustration there about that, and I share that frustration. But it's not something I can turn a blind eye to once it hits my radar. We don't have a choice. Also, government has the responsibility to, I believe, maintain the highest possible standards for a safe workplace, a safe environment for our tax base. I'm not accusing the private sector of being lackadaisical, but we try to take the higher ground whenever we can. And I hope I answered your question.
Thank you both, Councillor Junot and Mr. Hutton. Councillor Kelleher-Empey.
I have a couple of questions, if that's okay, Mayor Ireland.
Yes.
First of all, I want to congratulate Mr. Greathead and all your staff. Excellent presentations. Congratulations on getting the signs up. It's awesome. And I know that's the first phase of our waste finding. When do we proceed to the second phase, like, of the signs within the town? Because I didn't hear it mentioned in these budgets.
Your worship, to speak to that question, I figure that that's just going to be a concurrent activity. As we roll out, we have that budget line carried forward on the wayfinding sign, and I figured that we would reassess once the entrance signs were done, and then plot a path forward, and to continue along the project and see it to completion.
And Mr. Greathead, just on that, will there be more funding through the ID12 program as where we got the initial funding for this?
I'm not sure. I will have to check into that. I expect a substantial remainder to progress with some more work this year going forward. That's will be left over from the original, and I will look into that and see what options there are for funding.
Thank you. My second question, Mr. Greathead, how many total employees do we have in the operations department?
It's one thing I noticed when we were going through the presentation was, it was mentioned that there's a new sports field technician as one of our initiatives going forward. Previously, Mr. Michaud was the grounds and turf care maintenance worker, and he was looking after those when he came back into the utility department as the manager. So during 2020 for budget cuts, we didn't fill that position. It was just one of those ones that was just easy to take it off the table. We anticipated lower use on the sports field, like the rugby camps and all that other user groups. You know, we didn't anticipate it, so we didn't bother filling that position. So that won't be a new ad. I believe that we're sitting at around 21 staff right now within ops, but we have numerous terms, casuals, and employees, as well as we're one seasonal employee as well that we're at.
So the new position for the mechanic, that would have been actually just filling Mr. Baldick's job and he moved up, am I correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That was filling a vacant position.
Great. So we're now going forward, like for this budget, are we looking at 4 new positions? So the health and safety, the office manager, and the 2 maintenance, and the one for the fields. So 5. Am I correct?
It would be 5, 4 new positions plus filling the vacant position of the field technician or the sports field worker.
Okay. And in your presentation, you mentioned during the utilities that a compliance officer would be funded through there. Can you explain that to me, why a compliance officer would be funded through the utilities?
We feel it's only fair. The demand we put on the bylaw department mostly is we are constantly contacting the bylaw department to help us tow cars in the winter, or if there's an emergency water main break that we have to, have vehicles yanked down the street. They help us with that. They've also been instrumental helping us assess the cardboard, the commercial cardboard program that we're looking at. And as well, we need to get into some compliance inspections. And that's where I feel that we really need to support that position so we can enforce the grease trap programs for the commercial kitchens to make sure that when we go out and do our meter inspections, if we notice something, a little wonky out there, we're going to have somebody that we will need that support. As a police officer to come and, assist us in some of these items. So we felt, like there is a bona fide need, and also there'd be training required so that, we could send the crew, the entire crew from the bylaw, to standardized training. So we all know, this is what a grease trap should look like. This is how they're meant to operate. And then these officers would also be able to, inspect and recognize when there's an issue.
Thank you, Mr. Greathead. Thank you, Mayor Ireland.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kelleher-Hempy. Other questions from councillors? I could get started on a few in the absence of seeing other hands. And again, thank you, Mr. Greathead. So my questions will be to you, but through you to whoever you choose to designate. I'm wondering in a general sense whether the department has been tracking and is able to track cost savings. So for example, hiring the full-time mechanic was approved on the basis that that would save us in contracted costs. Similarly, there are capital acquisitions that are recommended, including, for example, the boom that's suggested, and part of the rationale is that that would save us in the long run from contracting costs and also give us a little more freedom. What I'd like to know is for any taxpayers that might be watching, is there a way to track and demonstrate where those cost savings are actually being achieved?
Your Worship, we don't have the administrative support. That's, an ask that we need. When our managers were preparing these budgets, like Mr. Hutton, he's advocating for a skilled trade position, namely a plumber. We went through and, he went through and just pulled all the plumbing related bills and costs that we incurred. Same with the Zoom boom or the man lift that we're looking at. And that's where we base those numbers on a repayment of a 3 to a 5 year plan. And that's where we would show that. So to directly answer your question, you know, we're lacking the administrative capability. We can get that information, but it would take away from what we're up to right now. So I see Mr. Hutton's hand is up, and I'm sure that he can speak to this as well.
Yes, fine, please do.
Yes, I can offer one tangible example tonight, just with the information I have on my desk available. Bringing an in-house mechanic that can complete our commercial vehicle inspection program. Minimum charge we would have from a contracted mechanic was about $260 per inspection. We have just under 20 commercial vehicles that require the annual inspection. So we're looking at about $6,000 savings by bringing that in-house. But that doesn't include the work the mechanic does in between inspections on that heavy duty equipment either. So that's just one hard tangible figure of $6,000, but that expands when you look at the year-round operation.
Right. Well, thank you. That is the type of information that I'm looking for, but I appreciate that it takes time and money to track as well. But it's an easier way to sell these requests to the public, I think, if we can actually track them. I had just a couple of other questions, and then I'll turn it over to other councillors. There was mention about the amount budgeted for snow removal. And it is my recollection that over the years we have discussed the possibility of a reserve account specific to snow clearing. And in fact, and I don't have it in front of me at this moment, but I thought in the last couple of days we looked at a reserve account that might relate to that. And so my question is, are we preparing to cushion an uncertain blow each year by having a budgeted amount and putting any surplus into a reserve account for that specific purpose so that we can equalize the payments and be prepared for differences between heavy snow years and lighter snow years?
I'll have to ask Ms. Belenchuk for, you know, the actual reserves, but like when we first got here, road maintenance was all in one lump. Now we've tried to break it out as, you know, a winter and a summer road maintenance, and we've tried to set budgets for that. Historically, the snow removal was not even that well tracked on the costs incurred. And so if there was a shortfall one year in the funding for snow removal, it ended up just taking out somewhere else within the budget. Maybe your contracted services were reduced, you know, and trying to stay within the goal lines of our envelope of our operating budget. Ms. Malchuk, are you able to speak to the rest of the question?
Yes, you're correct, Your Worship. There is a reserve contingency sitting there. It's at about 50,000 at the moment, and in the past few years, there has not been a transfer to that reserve. We have not had a surplus to transfer. So that department has always, well, as I've spoken to, roads are quite expensive, and we haven't seen much. And we've seen a lot more snow in the past few years too. So, yeah.
All right, thank you both for that review of that matter. And then my final question, again, very general, Mr. Greathead. The capital project list is daunting. And council, of course, can go through and attempt to prioritize the items on that list. And I'm not stating, but might be assuming that perhaps not everything on there is going to get approved. But rather than do that myself or have council do that, Are you able, or is your staff able to prioritize that list for us? I mean, I appreciate that some things are critical. Things like the extra walls for the stage, maybe not so much, since it's unlikely that we're going to be having any concerts anytime soon anyway. I can make those sorts of decisions, but I don't know enough of the technical detail to understand from the list what is most critical compared to others. And I wonder whether over the next few weeks that we have to get to the end of the approval process, that is something that could be provided to council.
Your worship, we can look towards that and rank it. And I think we'd have to do it by sector were we to go into this. Some of the items, it's the centrifuge that we're talking about for the wastewater treatment plant. That's a big ticket item. And, it's a $2.5 million project that we're looking at. Now, the problem with the biosolids is, and why we use a centrifuge, is we try to spin the water out of it to reduce the weight for the hauling. It reduces the amount of amalgamation material, namely the wood chips that we use as a carbon source for the breakdown and digestion of the biosolids. That centrifuge right now, it can only run, I'm not sure the exact RPM, but I'm right within the right zone for this discussion. But where the RPMs of the centrifuge should be running at, say, 2,800 revolutions a minute, the centrifuge that's existing there is so worn out that we're actually only able to run it at 1,700 RPM. So with pumps and centrifuges, they have, I guess, a logarithmic scale where it's a very steep curve. So we're not hitting the sweet spot on the operating parameters on that centrifuge. So that just ends up driving costs, exponentially up. We're use more chemicals, we're using more addendum to the biosolids and that. So I would say that, we've prepared this budget saying this is stuff that needs to happen this year. With our 2021 asks, we've gone through and we're, try to broaden out our capital request right through to 2025. But within the next week, I'm sure that our department can sit down and prioritize this list for you.
Right. I appreciate that. It is challenging for everybody, and I understand that health and safety issues are always critical. Compliance issues are critical. But is a centrifuge more important than a new garbage truck? And is that more important, or are they both more important than a boom, for example? That's the sort of ranking that your expertise can help me. All right, thank you for that, Mr. Greathead. Other questions from councillors? Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much, Mr. Greathead, and to your team. For all the evident hard work, I have to say, I appreciate and I feel confident in and having your eyes cast over all of the aspects of our infrastructure. And while you're quite right to be showing us your successes as you have, I appreciate seeing the truth, warts and all. So your hard work is evident, and turning over stones and finding the skeletons in the closet and exposing the, I guess, deterioration of our infrastructure for us to see. It's not a pleasant truth, and I agree with Mr. Mayor Ireland that it is frankly nearly overwhelming to see it laid out just quite as frankly as you have, but I appreciate it. We'll have lots of questions around some of the individual proposals, but we'll be here all night if I start us down that road, and we'll have time for that. I do understand that some of what we're looking at in this year's, in particular in the capital requests, are leftovers from last year. And I think it's also important that the public understand that because of budget restrictions last year. So I'd like to think that might be a little bit longer list this year than in some other years, but I also get the sense that we can expect to see, more of these kind of recommendations coming down the road in future years. One thing I want to just touch on is to register a concern around the point that Mayor Ireland mentioned earlier with respect to the concept overall of hiring tradespeople and equipment such as the lift to save money on the contract side. I understand the logic of that. I appreciate it very much, but I am concerned because I will need to see more evidence of clear savings on the contract side. I mean, if those kind of hires and those kinds of purchases make sense because we can save money, then we need to see the savings. And I think you mentioned an anticipated maybe $20,000, it went by quite quickly, $20,000 saving on the contract side, but that appeared to me to be offset by a pretty heavy spend on the other side. So we're going to need to look at that a little more closely because while I understand the concept, I think it's also important to remember that not always, but in a lot of cases, that contract work is, of course, going and staying in the community. So it may not be spent within our organization, but it at least is spent within our community, though I certainly understand, and for sure, and I think the heavy duty mechanic area, we were needing to ship those vehicles out of town all the time. So I'm not saying I do understand it. I agree with what Mayor Ireland proposed, and I would strongly suggest that when these proposals are consolidated and put together in a list, as I assume they will be, so that we can sit down and go through them one at a time, that list be prioritized to the best of your ability, because it seems like a lot to accomplish in 1 year, and I'm mindful of, frankly, where the dollars are going to come from. So I agree with any efforts that you can offer to help us understand relative priorities of some of these items would be helpful to us in the next few weeks. Addressing the deterioration of the infrastructure is going to require, and I think it's clear to anyone looking, massively higher revenues over the coming years. We're just not putting enough money into the system to address the infrastructure. And I got to say, it's pretty clear to me that every time we literally or figuratively dig a hole in the ground, we just turn up another rusty valve or leaking pipe or something, and that's not going to end anytime soon. So we're going to need to raise more money to put into our infrastructure. It's going to mean higher utility fees and higher taxes, higher user fees, and the community needs to understand that. This council and future councils are going to have to make tough choices. The community may have to get ready for reductions in some areas of service provision so we can direct funds to these critical municipal services. Otherwise, we will be caught between truly a rock and a hard place. This is expensive work and it's going to have to get done. And at the same time, the organization is going to have to work hard and work together with council to maximize revenues wherever possible. And I've mentioned before that I think we need to put our thinking hats on and look at every part of the organization to make sure we're maximizing revenues wherever we can, outside of simply, taxes and utilities, all of which are undoubtedly going to have to go up. So I don't think there was a question in there, but a few of the thoughts that you've left me with tonight. And thank you very much for a very thorough, detailed, and clear presentation. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I see no further hands up. So I think that would signal that we are near the end. Again, thank you, Mr. Greathead and Mrs. Melanchuk and the entire team for your presentation tonight, but also thank you all for your really excellent work, particularly through the last 9 months or so, making sure that Jasper residents have the benefit of essential services despite an ongoing pandemic. You've really all stepped up, and it's very much appreciated. And I just wanted to say, although Mr. Bolduc, this may be his first presentation of this nature, it's not really his first rodeo. And I wanted to take this opportunity because I didn't think it was highlighted during the presentation, but I want to thank both you, Mr. Greathead, and Mr. Bolduc, for your really excellent contribution to the commercial cardboard town hall earlier this year. You both had excellent presentations at that time and really helped the community on a difficult issue. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for your presentation this evening. Thank you, Mrs. Melanchuk. It appears that we are under budget for time tonight, so that's really excellent news. And I will bid you all then a final thanks and good evening.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and I will say for any members of the public, if you do have questions arising from anything you've heard tonight, do send us an email at info@town.jasper.ab.ca, and we will receive those until late Sunday and start to address them next week. Again, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Very nice evening. Thank you.